The human ship, Endurance, sailed quietly through the vast reaches of space. Its crew had been on a routine patrol, monitoring uncharted areas of the galaxy. But today, something was different. The calm of the ship was shattered by a sudden signal. A strange unknown craft was coming toward them. Ethan Stone, seasoned soldier, sat at his console, looking at the flashing lights on the screen. He wasn't easily shaken, but this was unexpected. The object wasn't showing any identification, and the crew had never seen anything like it before. "Captain," Ethan called, turning to the ship's commander. "Captain Rachel Moore. We're being hailed. There's an unidentified ship approaching." Captain Moore, a no-nonsense leader, gave a sharp nod. "Open the channel." Soft musical voice came through the speakers. "Human vessel. This is the Queen of the Zalarian Empire. We request immediate docking permission." The crew exchanged uncertain looks. The Zalarian Empire was known for its aggressive nature, but this message was different. The tone was calm, almost welcoming. The Queen of the Zalarians herself was speaking. That was rare, and the tone of her voice intrigued Ethan. "Docking permission granted," Captain Moore said, her voice steady but laced with a hint of tension. "Prepare for visitors." The ship's airlock opened. Ethan was chosen to join the team of officers who would meet the alien delegation. He adjusted his uniform, trying to look as professional as possible. As he stepped into the airlock, he was acutely aware of the strange tension in the air. He had faced many alien species, but this felt different. It was something almost magnetic about the situation. As the door opened, Ethan found himself face to face with the most imposing alien he had ever seen. The Zalarian Queen, Tarian, stood tall and regal, her eyes sharp but not unkind. Her skin shimmered like polished stone, a blend of dark violet and silver. Her presence was powerful, and yet there was a softness in her gaze. "Welcome, human," she said, her voice deep but warm. "I am Tarian, Queen of the Zalarians. I have come in peace." Ethan studied her for a moment. He had been prepared for a confrontation, but there was nothing threatening about her. Instead, there was an undeniable aura of wisdom and strength that made him feel small in comparison. He had read reports about the Zalarians, but seeing the Queen in person was different. "I'm Ethan Stone, Captain Moore's second-in-command." "We weren't expecting a visit from the Queen herself," Ethan replied, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. Tarian's lips curled into a small, almost amused smile. "I understand your surprise. It is rare for me to leave my homeworld, but your people have shown great potential. I wanted to see for myself." Ethan couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward her, something he couldn't quite explain. He'd dealt with hostile aliens before, but this wasn't like that. Tarian seemed genuine, though her power was evident in every movement. "Would you like to join me in our meeting room?" Ethan asked, motioning toward the ship's conference. Tarian nodded, her steps graceful as she followed him. The other officers watched them, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes on him, but he focused on the task at hand. He had to make sure this meeting went smoothly as they walked through the ship's halls. Tarian asked questions about the human race, their history, and their values. Ethan answered as best he could, feeling both honored and slightly nervous in her presence. Her intelligence was clear, and she seemed genuinely interested in learning. About humanity, finally, they reached the conference room. Ethan and Tarian sat at the long table, with Captain Moore and the other officers taking their places around them. "We seek an alliance," Tarian said, her voice calm but firm. "The Zalarians have been at war with several neighboring systems. We need allies, and I believe humans could be a valuable partner." The room fell silent. Ethan glanced around, seeing the shock on the faces of his fellow officers. An alliance with the Zalarians? This was unexpected. The Zalarians were known for their strength, but they had never been particularly friendly with humanity. An alliance? Captain Moore repeated, her voice cautious. "Why now?" Tarian's eyes met Ethan's, and he could feel the weight of her gaze. "The galaxy is changing. There are threats we cannot face alone. I believe humanity has the courage and the strength we need. But more than that, I believe our two species can learn from each other. We can achieve something greater than either of us could on our own." Ethan was silent for a moment. He had seen the damage caused by wars between alien species, and he had fought in many battles himself. The idea of peace was tempting, but could they really trust the Zolarians? "And if we accept?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. "What would you offer in return?" Tarian's smile softened. "I will offer my trust and my loyalty, and I will offer something more." She leaned forward slightly. "I offer my hand." Ethan blinked, not sure if he understood. Was she talking about an alliance, or was there something more personal behind her words? Before he could respond, Tarian's smile widened slightly. Her eyes sparkled with something deeper, something Ethan hadn't expected.
"Was that a
proposal?" she asked softly, her tone playful. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Was she joking, or was this something more serious? He didn't know, but something in the way she looked at him made him wonder if she was being entirely sincere. "I suppose it was," Ethan stammered, suddenly feeling very unsure of himself. Tarian's smile grew, and she nodded. "And I accept." The room was silent, and for a moment no one moved or spoke. Ethan's mind raced. Had the Queen just accepted an alliance, or was she accepting something more personal? Something he wasn't sure he was ready for. Captain Moore cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "Well, this is unexpected." Ethan glanced at Tarian. Her smile remained, but her eyes had softened. There was something in her gaze that made him feel both nervous and strangely comforted at the same time. The decision had been made, but for Ethan, it was just the beginning. The following days were filled with strange uncertainty. Ethan Stone couldn't stop thinking about the moment the Zolarian Queen had smiled and said, "Then I accept." He had expected her to be all business, focused solely on an alliance. But that smile, the way she looked at him, it was different. There was something more, something he didn't fully understand. The Endurance continued its mission. But now it felt like everything had changed. The crew couldn't ignore the presence of the Zolarian delegation on board, and neither could Ethan. Every time he walked through the corridors, he'd pass the officers who had attended the meeting with the Queen, and they'd glance at him. Some with knowing eyes, others with a mix of curiosity and concern. Ethan had tried to put it out of his mind. The Queen's words had been diplomatic after all, and it could have simply been a gesture of goodwill. But why had she looked at him the way she did? It was unlike anything he'd experienced before, even when dealing with other alien species. He couldn't help but wonder if the Queen's acceptance was just the beginning of something else. One afternoon, he was called to the ship's conference room again, this time for a private meeting with Captain Moore and the Zolarian Queen. The Queen had insisted on speaking with him alone, and Ethan wasn't sure what to expect. The door slid open as he arrived, and there she was, against Harian, the Queen of the Zolarians. She stood near the large observation window, her hands clasped behind her back. The way she held herself commanded respect. There was an air of royalty about her, but at the same time, Ethan couldn't help but notice how human she seemed in the way she carried herself. She wasn't just an alien monarch. She was someone who had experienced battles, losses, and victories, just like him. "Ethan." She greeted him softly, her voice as calm as it had been during their first meeting. "I wanted to speak with you privately." He nodded, unsure of what to say. "Of course, Your Majesty." "Please, Justarian," she said with a small smile, motioning for him to take a seat across from her. "We're beyond such formalities." Ethan hesitated for a moment before sitting down. Tarian took a seat as well, her posture relaxed, yet commanding. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady. Yet there was something more personal in it now, about the future of our two species. "And about you?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Yet she was speaking to him as though he were more than just a soldier now. Was this still part of the alliance talks, or was there something else she was hinting at? "I never thought I'd be sitting across from someone like you," Tarian continued, her eyes meeting his. "Your people have such strength, Ethan, not just in battle, but in spirit. I find it, intriguing." Ethan swallowed, unsure of how to respond. He'd heard flattery from aliens before, but this felt different. This wasn't about diplomacy or politics. There was something deeper in the way she looked at him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "I'm just doing my job," Ethan replied, his voice quieter than he intended. "I'm not a hero. I just ... do what's needed." Tarian's smile widened, and she leaned forward slightly. "I think you underestimate yourself." She paused, her gaze softening. "That's part of what I admire about you. You don't seek glory, and yet you have it in you. It's rare in this galaxy." Ethan was caught off guard. What was she saying? Is this still about the Alliance? Or was she implying something else? I don't know what to say," he admitted, feeling the tension in the air. "I'm not used to this kind of attention, especially from someone of your position." Tarian tilted her head, considering him carefully. "I've met many powerful beings in my time, Ethan, but none have had such a ... quiet strength. Something I want to understand better." There it was again. The way she spoke to him felt more personal than political. Ethan shifted in his seat, unsure whether to push for answers or to leave it alone. The last thing he wanted was to misinterpret her intentions, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the way he felt when he was near her. "We both have responsibilities," Tarian continued. "But even a queen must admit that. Sometimes she is drawn to something ... unexpected. Something she can't control." Ethan didn't know how to respond. Was she saying what he thought she was saying? Was this some sort of test, or was she genuinely interested in him? Before he could speak, Tarian's expression softened, almost wistful. "You may not understand now, but there's a bond between us. Perhaps it's too soon to call it a connection. But it's there, I feel it." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't deny the truth in her words. Every time they spoke, every time their eyes met, there was something. Something that he couldn't shake. But how could anyone consider a relationship with an alien queen? And more importantly, how would his people react? "Are you saying that?" Ethan began, but his words faltered. "I don't know what it is, but yes, I feel it too," Tarian admitted softly. "It's a dangerous thing for both of us, but it's there. And it would be foolish to ignore it." The silence between them was thick, filled with the weight of their unspoken thoughts. Ethan couldn't quite process everything she had just said, but one thing was clear. This was no longer just about politics or alliances. There was something far deeper growing between them. Tarian stood, her regal presence once again commanding the room. "I wanted you to know. I won't force anything, but the offer stands, Ethan, if you're willing." Ethan stood as well, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't know what to say." Tarian smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything now, but think about it. I will wait." And with that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan standing alone, his mind racing with everything he had just learned, and everything he wasn't sure he was ready. Ethan spent the next few days lost in thought. The Zalarian Queen's words echoed in his mind. "There's a bond between us." It was something he couldn't ignore, even if he tried. But how could he respond? How could he possibly navigate this situation with an alien queen, one of such power and wisdom? He had never been one to entertain such ideas. But Tarian's words stirred something in him he didn't fully understand. His days on the Endurance became more and more difficult as the moments he spent with Tarian lingered in his thoughts. Every time he walked through the halls of the ship, he felt her presence like a ghost that would never leave. The crew noticed his distracted demeanor, but he didn't have the answers for them. He didn't even have answers for himself. One afternoon, he found himself walking down the ship's corridor toward the conference room again. Tarian had requested another private meeting. She hadn't said much about it, but the way she looked at him the last time made him wonder what it was about this meeting that she found important. As he entered the room, he was surprised to see the Queen standing by the large window once more, her back to him. She was looking out at the stars, her posture regal and calm. But as he approached, she turned to face him, and this time, there was something different about the way she regarded him, something more vulnerable. "Ethan." She greeted him softly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. "Thank you for coming." Ethan stood still for a moment, unsure of how to respond. There was a gentleness in her tone that he hadn't noticed before. It made him wonder if the powerful alien queen had ever been truly vulnerable in her life. "Don't know what I'm doing here, Tyrion," Ethan admitted, his voice low. I'm just trying to understand everything. Everything you said. Everything that's happening. ... Tyrion nodded, her expression softening. "I understand. This is not something you expected. I know it's difficult to trust feelings. That don't make sense?" Ethan stepped closer, drawn to her presence. The room seemed smaller now, as if the walls were closing in with the tension between them. His mind was a whirlwind, but his heart, strangely, felt calm. "I've never felt anything like this before," Ethan confessed. "I've always focused on my duty, but when I'm around you, it's different. I can't explain it, but it's there." Tyrion took a step forward, her eyes locked onto his. "I know. And that's what frightens me. I have spent my entire life as a ruler, a leader. I have learned to suppress many emotions. But with you, ... I can't seem to keep them at bay." The voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the faint trace of vulnerability in it. It was unexpected, and it made him realize how much weight Tyrion carried as a leader. She wasn't just the queen of the Zolarians. She was a woman, someone who had her own fears, her own desires, and somehow Ethan had become a part of those feelings. "I've never had anyone question my authority before." "Ethan, not like this. Not in the way you do," Tyrion continued. "But I think it's because you see me, not just as a queen, but as someone who is ... just like you. Someone who has their own doubts." Ethan swallowed hard. He had never imagined that someone so powerful, so untouchable, could feel doubts. It made her seem more real to him, more human. Despite their differences, they were both individuals with fears and hopes. "I've always believed in duty," Ethan said, his voice firm now, though the uncertainty still lingered in his heart. "And my duty to my people comes first. If we ... if we have a chance to make something work here, I need to know what it is, what you want." Tyrion looked at him for a long moment, as if she were weighing his words, trying to decide how to answer him. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but full of sincerity. "I want to know what it's like to live without a mask," she said. "Want to know what it feels like to be seen for who I am, not for my title. I want to know what it feels like to be free of responsibility for just a moment." Her words struck Ethan deeply. He hadn't realized how much weight Tyrion carried on her shoulders. As the queen of her people, she had always been in control, always had to be strong. But in that moment, she was vulnerable, and it made Ethan realize that despite her power, she was still just a person. "I don't know if I'm the right person." "To help you with that," Ethan said, his voice uncertain. Tyrion smiled softly, shaking her head. "I'm not asking you to solve everything. I'm only asking you to be with me in whatever way that may be." Ethan's heart raced. He had always been someone who kept his emotions in check, someone who never let personal feelings get in the way of duty. But now, standing in front of the alien queen, he felt something stir within him that he couldn't ignore. "I'm not sure what this is, Tyrion," he said quietly, taking a step closer to her. "But I can't deny that there's something between us. I feel it too." For a moment, there was only silence between them, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Then Tyrion took a deep breath, her expression softening. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And that's enough for now." The quiet that followed was different than before. There was no tension, no confusion, just a shared understanding between them. Ethan wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time, he didn't feel afraid to find. The days after Ethan's private conversation with Tyrion seemed to stretch on forever. He had never felt so conflicted in his life. There was still so much he didn't understand. Was this connection with Tyrion truly something more than an alliance? Was there more to her than the queen, the powerful leader who ruled over her people? Or was this just some fleeting moment, a strange feeling that would fade as quickly as it had come? Ethan tried to focus on his duties, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Tyrion. Every time he saw her, every time their eyes met, the pull between them grew stronger. He knew his feelings for her were real, but he also knew how complicated everything had become. He was a soldier. He had a duty to his people, but how could he ignore the emotions stirring inside him? Meanwhile, the crew of the Endurance had started to notice the change in Ethan. His friends and fellow officers had seen the way he interacted with the Zalarian delegation. They were observant, and they weren't blind to the growing closeness between him and Tyrion. And as much as they respected him, they had their concerns. One evening, as Ethan was walking through the corridors of the ship, he was approached by Lieutenant Grace Walker, a trusted friend and fellow officer. He was an experienced fighter, sharp-witted and always straight to the point. "Hey, Ethan," Grace said as she caught up with him. "Got a minute?" Ethan nodded, though he had a feeling he knew what was coming. Grace always had a way of cutting to the heart of things. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she began, her expression serious. "You've been acting strange lately, and I'm not the only one who's noticed it. People are talking." Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm doing my job, Grace. I've just been busy with all the diplomatic talks." Raised an eyebrow. "It's not just about the talks, Ethan. It's about you. You've been different since that last meeting with the Queen. You're distracted, and I can see it in your eyes." "What's going on?" Ethan hesitated. Wasn't sure how to explain what was happening. Had never been in a situation like this before. But Grace was his friend, and she deserved the truth. "I don't know how to explain it," Ethan admitted. "But I think I'm beginning to feel something for Tyrion. Something more than just a political alliance. And I don't know what to do with it." Grace's eyes softened, but she didn't look surprised. She had always been perceptive, and she had known there was something between Ethan and the Queen, even if he hadn't fully realized it himself. "You know, this could cause problems, right?" Grace said, her voice low but serious. "I'm not just talking about your job. I'm talking about the crew, the mission, and the fact that Tyrion is the queen of an entire empire. Getting involved with her isn't just personal, it's political. And you have to think about the bigger picture." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had thought about it. In fact, it was all he had thought about. The risks, the consequences. He had run through every possible scenario in his mind. But no matter how much he tried to convince himself to stay away, the pull he felt toward Tyrion wouldn't go away. "I know, Grace. Believe me. I've thought about nothing else," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But every time. I see her every time we talk. I can't deny what's between us." Grace looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just don't let your emotions cloud your judgment, Ethan," she said softly. "You're a good soldier, but you're also a good person. Don't let anyone take advantage of that. And don't lose sight of who you are in the middle of all this." Ethan nodded, grateful for Grace's honesty. She was right, of course. He had to be careful. The situation was delicate, and his emotions couldn't take precedence over his duty, but it was hard. Tyrion was unlike anyone he had ever met. She was strong, intelligent, and kind in a way he hadn't expected. And yet, she was also a ruler, a leader who had to make tough decisions every day. Made their connection even more complicated. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The weight of his thoughts pressed down on him as he lay awake in his quarters. He had to make a choice. But how could he choose between duty and the woman who had captured his heart? The next day, he found himself standing at the entrance to the Zalarian quarters on the ship. He had been avoiding Tyrion for a few days, unsure of how to face her after his conversation with Grace. But now, he couldn't put it off any longer. He needed answers. And more importantly, he needed to understand what this connection between them really was. He pressed the button on the door. And after a moment, the door slid open to reveal Tyrion standing there, her eyes locking onto his. She was dressed in her usual regal attire, but her expression softened when she saw him. "Ethan," she greeted him quietly as if she had been waiting for him. "I've been hoping you'd come." Ethan took a deep breath. He had to be honest with her. "Tyrion, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us." Tyrion stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. "Please, come in." As he stepped into her quarters, the door closed behind him. The room was quiet, peaceful, but the tension between them was palpable, as though everything they had been avoiding was finally coming to the surface. "I need to know where we stand," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I can't keep pretending like this doesn't matter. Not anymore. Tyrion looked at him, her gaze filled with understanding. Neither can I, she said softly. But I cannot promise you a future without risk. There will be consequences. Ethan, there always are when it comes to matters of the heart. Ethan looked into her eyes and knew in that moment that he was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would decide what the future held, no matter the cost. Ethan had never been a man who made decisions lightly. In his years of service, he had learned to prioritize duty above all else. But standing before Tyrion, the Zalarian queen, he felt a stirring within him that he couldn't ignore. Every moment they spent together only deepened his feelings. Yet as much as he wanted to follow his heart, the responsibilities he carried, the weight of his position, and the expectations of his people made him question whether he could afford to pursue this connection. That evening, after their conversation, Ethan found himself staring out of the ship's observation window. The stars stretched out before him, endless and cold. He thought about Grace's words, about duty, about loyalty, about the consequences of his actions. Grace had been right. He couldn't just think of himself. His feelings for Tyrion were undeniable, but the risks were greater than anything he had ever faced. The next day, Tyrion sent for him again. He had been avoiding her, trying to sort through his thoughts, but he couldn't escape the pull she had on him. His heart raced as he made his way to her quarters. He had decided that today would be the day he would make a choice, either commit to this path with her, or step back for the sake of his duty. As he reached her door, it slid open silently. Tyrion was already standing there, her regal figure, filling the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, those eyes that had once been so warm and inviting, seemed to carry a weight now, as if she too was preparing for something important. Ethan, she greeted him softly. Knew you would come. I had to, Ethan said, his voice steady, despite the nervous tension building in his chest. I can't keep avoiding this. We need to talk about what comes next. Tyrion stepped aside to let him in. I've been waiting for this moment. Ethan, I can't pretend I haven't felt this growing between us. But you are right. There is much to consider. The door closed softly behind him as he stepped into the room. It was calm and peaceful, but the air felt heavy with unspoken words. Tyrion motioned for him to sit. They both took seats across from each other. After everything we've shared, Ethan began, his voice low, I need to understand where we stand. If we go forward with this, there will be no turning back. It's not just about us anymore. It's about the future of our people, the future of the galaxy. Tyrion nodded, her gaze unwavering. I know the risks, Ethan. I know that what we have could cause a rift between our people. The Zalarians have always been known for their strength, but they also value loyalty and tradition. To have their queen, their leader, become emotionally involved with a human soldier, someone seen as an outsider, could be seen as a betrayal. Ethan clenched his fists, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had known the risks, but hearing them spoken aloud made them feel all the more real. He had always understood the consequences of war and politics. But this was different. This was personal. I don't know if I can make this decision, Tyrion, Ethan said, looking down at his hands. I want to be with you, but I can't ignore the responsibility I have to my people. They need me. You need me. But if I'm with you, it could change everything. The humans will see this as a betrayal, and they might not forgive me. Tyrion's expression softened, and she reached across the table, her hand gently resting on his. You're not alone in this, Ethan. I have made my choice. But I understand the burden you carry. If you choose to stay with your people, I will accept that. But I hope you know, whatever you decide, you are not abandoning me. We both have our duties, and we both have to make sacrifices, but our hearts are our own to follow. Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him, though the conflict still raged within him. He had never imagined that someone, especially someone of Tyrion's power, could understand his dilemma so clearly. Yet there was still a part of him that hesitated. Could he truly leave behind everything he had known? Could he choose a future with her, knowing it would mean giving up everything else? Why me, Tarion? Ethan asked quietly, looking into her eyes. Why now? You could have anyone. You're a queen, a ruler. You don't need a human soldier in your life. Tarion smiled softly, the sadness in her eyes evident. Because you see me, Ethan, not just as a queen, but as a woman, as someone who has fought for everything I have. I have spent my life surrounded by advisors and politicians. I have never been seen for who I truly am, but with you, I feel something real, something honest. You make me feel human again. Ethan swallowed hard, his heart aching at her words. He had never imagined that he could make someone like her feel seen, feel heard, and yet here she was, opening herself to him in a way that no one else had ever done. The silence between them stretched out, filled with the weight of their emotions. Ethan knew that this moment would change everything. The question was, could he live with the consequences? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he made his decision. I can't leave you, Tarion, Ethan said, his voice firm. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to be with you. Whatever it takes. Tarion's eyes brightened, and for the first time, Ethan saw a hint of relief in her expression. She stood up and walked toward him, her steps graceful. Then we will face whatever comes together, Ethan. Our people may not understand, but we will lead them. We will show them that what we have is not just a moment, it's a future. Ethan stood too, his chest swelling with a sense of resolve. He had made his choice, and now there was no turning. The decision had been made. Ethan stood in the quiet room, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked at Tarion. She had accepted him, and now they would face the future together. There was no turning back. They had chosen each other, despite the risks, despite the consequences. But the weight of what they had chosen was something neither of them could ignore. Days passed and life aboard the Endurance continued. The crew had already noticed the change in Ethan's demeanor. They could tell something was different, but none of them dared to ask. The ship's mission was still their priority, and the focus remained on preparing for whatever lay ahead. But every time Ethan passed by the officers, he could feel their curious eyes on him. Some looked at him with concern, others with confusion. It was clear that the path he had chosen was one that not everyone understood. Tarion had insisted that their relationship remain private for now. They both knew that the alliance between their species was fragile, and the last thing they needed was for rumors to spread or for either side to feel betrayed. But even in secret, there was something powerful between them. Every stolen moment, every quiet conversation only deepened their bond. And Ethan found himself questioning if it was possible to keep something so important hidden. One evening, as the stars twinkled outside the observation deck, Ethan and Tarion found themselves alone again. The ship was quieter than usual, with most of the crew either off-duty or busy with their own tasks. Tarion stood at the window, gazing out at the endless expanse of space, while Ethan stood a few feet away, lost in thought. Do you ever feel like we're living in two worlds, Ethan? Tarion asked, her voice soft but filled with meaning. She turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. I can't help but wonder if we're doing the right thing. My people expect me to lead them, to make the hard decisions. And you're expected to lead your people, too. Oh. But sometimes, I wonder if either of us will ever truly be able to live for ourselves. Ethan walked up beside her, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was brief, but meaningful. I don't know what the future holds, he said honestly. But I do know one thing. We can't keep living in fear of what might happen. We have to live for now, for each other. And whatever comes next, we face it together. Tarion's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. Together. She repeated the word as though it held the key to everything they had both been searching for. But there is something we must face, Ethan. The galaxy may not be ready for what we are about to do. There are those who will not understand, and there are enemies who will see us as a threat. Ethan's mind shifted to the bigger picture. He had always known that the alliance between the humans and the Zolarians would not be easy. The two species had different values, different ways of thinking, and yet here they were, standing together. But he also knew that their enemies would see this as a weakness, as something to exploit. I know, Ethan said, his voice steady. "We've been through wars before, but this feels different. We're not just fighting for our people. We're fighting for our future, for the chance to live the life we choose. But I won't let anything happen to you, Tarion, if I've chosen. You and I'll stand by you, no matter the cost." Tarion smiled, her eyes full of gratitude. "And I've chosen you, Ethan. This isn't just about politics or power. This is about us, about what we can build together." Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden beep of the communication console. Ethan turned toward the screen, and Tarion stepped back, understanding that the moment was over. They had spoken honestly, but duty was calling. "Ethan Stone, please report to the bridge," the voice on the other end said. Ethan nodded, his mind already shifting to the task ahead. But before he left, he turned back to Tarion. "I'll be back soon. We'll talk more." Tarion's gaze softened, and she gave him a small nod. "I'll be waiting." The walk to the bridge was a short one, but every step felt heavy. Ethan knew the gravity of the situation. They were on the brink of something bigger than themselves. The humans and the Zalarians had already made tentative plans for the future. But there were still many unknowns, many dangers that lurked in. The shadows. When he arrived on the bridge, Captain Moore was waiting for him, her face serious. The rest of the crew was also present, monitoring various systems. It was clear that something important was happening. "Ethan, glad you could join us," Captain Moore said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "We've received word from the Galactic Council. They've learned of our alliance with the Zalarians." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had known this was coming. The Council, made up of representatives from several different galactic powers, had been watching the Endurance closely, and now they would have to answer for their actions. "What's their response?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice calm. "The Council is displeased," Captain Moore said. "They view our alliance with the Zalarians as a potential threat. They want to see us cut ties with Tarion and her people immediately. But we know that's not an option. We've made our choice." Ethan exchanged a glance with the other officers. There was no turning back now. The Council might disapprove, but they had already committed to this path, and they would not be intimidated. "We're not backing down," Ethan said, his voice firm. "We've chosen a future, and we're going to fight for it. Whatever happens, we face it together." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed his words. Then Captain Moore nodded, her expression resolute. "Together." She echoed, "Tara was right. The galaxy might not be ready for what they had started, but it didn't matter." Ethan and Tarion had chosen their path, and they would face whatever came next, side by side. They had already made the hardest choice of all, and now they would build their future, no matter the